Shalom. This is Brother Yashar Ban Afraim here at Nazarene Hebrew Assembly. This segment came across because it's been brought to our attention that a lot of our brothers and sisters are being caught away into Islam under the sense that they believe or they've been told that Islam is so-called African Americans' true original way of life or culture or spiritual identity, which is completely untrue. And we're gonna prove this. One of the things that one of the brothers online on YouTube specifically, he has a large following. He promoted that the word Arab means black man or black people, which is wrong. It's not correct. But here we're going to use the Hebrew Strong's Concordance right here. If you look at the word Arabi, you see that it means a mixed or mingled people, because the Ishmaelites mixed with the Jebusites and the Midianites and so on and so forth over there in what you would call the Arabian Peninsula, and created marriage alliances, and they became a mixed or mingled people, bolstering their numbers over there in the Arabian Peninsula. So therefore, Arabi would be more appropriate to say it's a mixed or mingled people who are from east of the land of Israel, or Canaan. So that's erroneous to say that Arab means black man or black people. Etymologically, that's not correct. Another thing that kind of strikes me about the whole teaching that so-called African Americans originally, our culture and way of life was Islam, is just completely erroneous. But Islam was one of our biggest enemies as a people. And we're going to show that Islam enslaved us for quite some time. It's not that hard to show that. It's really not that hard to show that. All you got to do is just do a little bit of research about Islam and the slave trade, and you'll see that Islam was a big time slaver. Real quick, we're going to use Wikipedia. Here it says the Arab slave trade. The Arab slave trade was the practice of slavery in the Arab world, mainly in Western Asia. Western Asia is what you would call today the Middle East, but it was renamed Middle East later, but originally it was Western Asia. Also North Africa, the Horn of Africa, Southeast Africa, and Europe. Europe, not so much, but this barter occurred chiefly between the medieval era and the early 20th century. The trade was conducted through slave markets in these areas, with the slaves captured mostly from Africa's interior. So there you go. Islam was a huge proponent in enslaving our people. Let's look at those areas again. North Africa, Horn of Africa, Southeast Africa. Okay, it says with the slaves captured mostly from Africa's interior. Okay, so Islam was enslaving us for a long time before we even landed in America as slaves or anywhere else. Islam was on the forefront of enslaving us. But let's continue. One of those big things I wanted to touch on was that when they did come, that we did have a fight. We did fight Islam. And one of those big proponents of fighting Islam was the Hebrew queen Kahina or Kohina. She was of the tribe of Levi, specifically of a descendant of Aaron. A descendant of Aaron was called a Kohen, or they were called the Kohanim. We'll get that real quick as well, just real fast. We use Wikipedia again. It's simpler. Kohen or Kohen. Okay, Kohen, priest, is the Hebrew word for priest, used colloquially in reference to the Aaronic priesthood. Okay, Levitical priests or Kohanim. You see, so if you're a Kohen, that means you're a descendant of Aaron, of the tribe of Levi. So Queen Kahina or Kohina, right there is letting you know her pedigree, that she was of the tribe of Levi, specifically a descendant of Aaron. Kohina or Kohina, Kohen, Kohanim. Okay, so we'll get a little bit of history on Kahina, just a little bit. We'll use this site here real quick. Sometimes you got to be careful with some of these sites. They kind of twist things a little bit. just a tad bit sometimes. But there's a statue of her still there in Africa today. Kahina, 7th century, was a Berber, a warrior queen and seer who led her people against the Arab invasion of North Africa in the 7th century. Okay, so you'll see here it says, while Kahina is an Arabic title meaning prophetess, where clearly the writer here doesn't understand, you know, the true essence of the name or word Kohina or Kohen. You know, is a derivative from the Kohanim or Kohen, descendants of Aaron, as we just recently just talked about. Okay, so you know we can see that Kahina was a huge asset to our people in fighting off the Muslims who were coming down to conquer into Africa. Okay. So, although Kahina is commonly referred to as a Berber queen, the indigenous people of the region know her as the Imizigin, which is the more accurate term. And I'm probably butchering that name, so forgive me, brothers and sisters, if I'm saying that wrong. So Kahina's life is only known through later Arab historians writing on the Muslim conquest of Africa. Okay. These historians, as well as other legends, claim that she was a Jewish sorceress who descended from the Beta Yisrael, Beta Israel community of Ethiopian Jews. Okay. She is said to have been a royal member of the Jawa tribe within the larger confederacy known as the Zenata tribe of Mauritania, a princess who then became queen and ruled over an autonomous state in the area of the Aras Mountains in modern-day eastern Algeria. So you know, sometimes you gotta work through some of these things here and there. All right, so yeah. So sometimes you gotta work through some of the stuff they're gonna do sometimes. So yeah, sorry, I'm trying to look and see what other sources I can get for you that you might find interesting. Yeah, so I was trying to. I was trying to get you a quote that I thought was quite interesting. But I don't see it on here. So yeah, we're gonna move on to this other section here. Okay, so here you say, we'll see here. The Arab armies enriched themselves as they rampaged across Persia, Afghanistan, and northern India to the east, and then in Egypt and Libya to the west. Now, Egypt is North Africa, Libya is Africa as well. The march of Islam had barely missed a step when, in 694, the Arab forces drove into Africa Minor. Expecting an easy sweep, the Muslims met fierce resistance in Barbary. Barbary, that's Africa. The Berbers rallied around their queen. Berbers, that's a term that they have applied to certain black people in Africa. Okay, the Berbers rallied around their queen, the Jewess Kahina, swearing to follow her into battle against the invaders. The Judeo-Berber army was swelled by soldiers of the pagan Berber tribes after their king Kosila was killed by the Arabs. Queen Kahina became truly the queen and military commander of all the Berbers. Now, this is a quote that she would say, that she would shout out as kind of a war rally. Lions of Africa and Judah, the queen would shout to her Berber troops. Show these Arabs that we will never be enslaved by Islam. Our beloved Africa will remain free. Let our slogan be the cry of the zealots of old, freedom or death. Okay. Now, this Queen Kahina, you know, she was a Hebrew queen of Africa. Okay. And she fought off the Muslims. They thought that she had some kind of, magic power, or that she was a sorceress. They didn't understand how they were able to, repel the Islamic invasion like they did. They even said that she was able to foresee the future because, her tactics would always thwart their attempts to invade. So, I mean, eventually she did fall, and Islam did come in and bring the sword upon the Hebrews in Africa, North Africa, West Africa. But Queen Kahina, she did fight them off for quite some time, and so that is a substantial part of history, of Hebrew history in Africa, in fighting off Islam's conquest and enslavement of the Hebrews of Africa, specifically of the Sudan, and everything. So that's something that you could research on your own, but beware that sometimes you're gonna go to sources who will twist things a bit here and there concerning her appearance and make her look, as if she was a pale skinned individual. But then you'll hear them in their sources say that she was an African Berber and Jewish woman. She was clearly a Hebrew African queen. That's without disputing. The Muslims make a very large account of her because of her military campaigns against them, and how successful her efforts were in repelling Islam's conquest of Africa. So we're not going to spend too much time there, but I just want you to take note that Islam, they came down on us to come against us. So here we'll just read this too. Under their valiant queen, Northwest Africa was cleansed of Arab mercenaries. Commander Uqba, who had at one point broken through all the way to the Atlantic Ocean, was killed in a Berber ambush. His armies were pushed back in retreat to Kairouan, the new Muslim base in central Tunisia. The arrogant Uqba had tried to intimidate the proud Berbers with force instead of patiently trying to convert them to Islam. You see, with face-saving diplomacy. See, Queen Kahina's skills were again tested in the second, more massive Arab invasion. A new Arab general, Hassan, had driven across North Africa with a fresh army of 40,000 horsemen and had taken Carthage from the Byzantine Greeks. Queen Kahina did not confront this massive force, but outflanked it by taking the city of Bagher from Byzantine garrison. You see, so she was making some strong, successful effort against Islam's conquest of Africa, and like I said, she there's a statue over there today. So that's historical fact that this African Hebrew Israelite queen was one of our ancestors and was fighting off the Arab invasion, the Muslim invasion. We are not the Arabs. Islam is not our original way of life or spiritual function. It was brought upon us through jihad and Sharia law. They forced Islam upon us. It was either you can accept Islam or you can become a slave or you can get your head chopped off. That's pretty much the only options you really had there. So of course, eventually a lot of our people, after it came down, were forced converted to Islam, and we had quite a bit of a powerful reign even as Muslims, but that was something that was forced upon us. We were forced converted. But we'll continue. I don't want to go off on a tangent there. I want to keep this short if I can. So that's something that's definitely relevant to history. Another big thing to me is we'll read this too, okay? Now, this is from Babylon to Timbuktu, okay, page 92. Eldad the Danite. In the 9th century, a black African Hebrew arrived in the city of Kairouan in Algeria. Algeria is in Africa. And this city was one of the famous Talmudic schools. The name of this Hebrew was Eldad the Danite. He told a credible story of a Hebrew empire south of the Sahara in the western Sudan. Okay. Let's say that again. Let's read that again. He told a credible story of a Hebrew empire south of the Sahara in the western Sudan. According to Eldad the Danite, the Hebrews in the interior of Africa spoke a Phoenician Hebraic language mixed with Arabic. They had a religion which had come down from Moses and a Hebrew emperor. It was believed that this emperor was named Tlauton or Bolatan, Eldad said that the people of this tribe had fled from the kingdom of Israel after Sennacherib, the Assyrian, had subdued it. Okay, so he's talking about the northern kingdom of Israel. Okay, Ephraim. Okay, and that the other Israelite tribes such as Naphtali, Gad, and Asher were in the land from which he came. He told of the laws of Moses which they followed, the complete series of the scriptures except Esther and Lamentations. He did not speak of the legal works that were produced in Babylon and Palestine after the destruction of the first temple, of which the Algerian Jews had a knowledge. These extraordinary works were the Mishnah and the Talmud. See, so basically, the Hebrews that he's mentioning in Africa, they didn't have the Talmud. Okay, the Talmud can't. Is not. Is that what he's saying is that they were exiled from the land and came into Africa, prior to the Babylonian captivity. So therefore, they didn't have the Babylonian Talmud that was forged, during the Babylonian captivity, being that this is the northern kingdom of Israel who came down. But let's continue here. Okay. Eldad displayed as evidence some ceremony pertaining to the slaughtering of animals for food. It was written in Hebrew with an Arabic tinge, but Eldad claimed that he knew no other language than Hebrew. In regard to Eldad's story, the Gaon, head of the Jews, assured the people that the story was credible. We are grateful for the travels and researches of Nahum Shlosh, who wrote in the early part of the 20th century. He said, "For many years, the author of this book has been gathering material for a history of the Jewish migrations, plural, into the Sahara and the Sudan." Okay, this is where all the slaves were brought from to America. Okay, one part of his work is already done: the establishing of the authenticity of these migrations. To the writing of the Arabs and the oral traditions of the country, he can now add the archaeological evidence furnished by the ruins of ancient Jewish cities in the Sahara and the Sudan. Okay? Let's say that again. To the writing of the Arabs, okay, because the Arabs have in the Tariq al-Sudan and the Tariq al-Fatash, they mention that we are the Hebrews and that they encountered us when they came down to Africa to chronicle and enslave us. They took well note that we were the Hebrews, that we had Torah scrolls written in Aramaic, and that we spoke a Hebraic dialect, and we had Hebrew customs and traditions and culture from the Torah, from the Bible. Okay, so let's start again. To the writing of the Arabs and the oral traditions of the country, he can now add the archaeological evidence furnished by the ruins of the ancient Jewish cities in the Sahara and the Sudan, and the documentary evidence of the Hebrew inscriptions like those of Tuat, which date from the 13th and 14th centuries. It is now an established fact that Ghana was a black Hebrew state. See? Let's say it again. It is now an established fact that Ghana was a black Hebrew state. Okay? And then he says, "At this junction, I shall continue my writing concerning the Zah dynasty of Ghana." Okay? So it's quite interesting. So, I mean, there's actually an ancient stone throne with Paleo Hebrew on it, still there to this day, in the exact location where slaves were taken from. Also, there's that ancient onyx stone that has Paleo Hebrew written on it, and it says the name of the tribe of Gad on it, still there today. I mean, there's so much Hebraic artifacts there in Africa, in West Africa in particular. So yeah, but we'll continue. Another thing that I thought was interesting that I thought you might find amusing here is basically this brother who touches on our heritage. I mean, he's very passionate about it. So let's get that real quick.
On Samson sleep upon her knees, and she called for a man, and she caused him to shave off the 7 locks off his head, and she began to afflict him, and his strength went from him. You see, Samson was the first Rasta. He was a Negro lion fighter, similar to the African Maasai tribe, Judges 14:5 and 16:19. You see, Samson tore a lion apart as he would a young goat. And as a Nazarite, he wore 7 dreadlocks. He was mahogany in body color, just like Malcolm X, and his visage was blacker than coal. He was a Negro, Lamentations 4, 7, and 8. And this is really hard for people to see in Scripture, because predominantly it has been the Caucasians that have been in charge of the Scriptures, right? For millennia. Lamentations 5:10, our skin was black like an oven. Job 30 verse 30, my skin is black upon me and my bones are burned with heat. Deuteronomy 28 verse 68, and Yahweh shall bring you into Mitzrayim, Egypt again with ships. And the way of which I said to you, you shall see it no more again. And there you shall be sold to your enemies for slaves and female slaves, and no man shall buy you. And that is what happened to the regal class of the house of Judah. And I want to give you a brief history. I won't go into it too much, but I can't just make that statement because there'll be people that will push back. But I want to give you a brief history on slavery. I was just amazed, I got to tell you. I mean, when you come to America and you talk to people about slavery, you can talk to black people about slavery, white people about slavery, and they'll give you all this history on slavery, and it only goes back to the 16th and the 17th century. And you're like, don't they teach you the history of slavery? Why? Ask the bloody question. Why are they only teaching you the history of slavery as far back as the 16th and the 17th century? Why are they only going that far back? Because they don't want you to go farther back than that, because then you'll actually find out the truth. But from the 16th and 17th century, we'll teach you about slavery. You've got to go further back, and you've got to understand and question, why do they do this throughout the whole of America in all the public schools? Why do they only go back as far as the 16th and the 17th century to talk about slavery? We've got to go further back than that. Because Islam designed infernal slavery. And then the Ashkenazi Khazars, those who say they are Jews and are not, are the ones that marketed it. And the regal Negro nomads exiled from the kingdom of Judah were the main recipients of it at the hands of the indigenous black Africans. Because you've got to understand, the regal class of the house of Judah came down from Israel, and they came into the land of the black Africans. And the black Africans resented the regal class of the house of Judah in their land, because they had laws, they had customs, they had civility. And they were a regal class of Negro that came down into Africa. And later on, it was the Ashkenazi, the Islamic slave traders as well, that then worked together with the indigenous black Africans to enslave the regal house of Judah. This is what we've got to understand, but you've got to go back before the 16th century to understand the roots of it. So we're going to see, as we dig into this, where this slavery came from, because it was really a system that was very, very well crafted. There was Islamic masters, and there were white Ashkenazi Khazar ship owners. There were the buyers and the sellers. And they're not going to fill you in on all of this, but really you've got a 4-tier system. Number one, you have the Negro nomads that were exiled from the kingdom of Judah. Number two, you had indigenous black African hunters that resented the regal Negro nomads that had come into their territory with their own customs, with their own laws that were different and would not assimilate into their tribal culture. They were their own tribe. They were the regal house of Judah. And number three, you had Islamic trappers that worked with the indigenous black Africans to trap the regal Negro house of Judah. And then you had them sell them to the Ashkenazi ship merchants, along with many Portuguese and British Ashkenazi. You see, it's just like Al-Qaeda today. Or is it ISIS? Or is it ISIL? Or is it IS? I mean, right? Let's just change the name as much as possible to throw you all off so you really don't know what's going on. Let's keep switching the identity to hide the people. Why don't we just keep renaming you? Are you Negro? Oh, no, you're not Negro. No, you're colored. No, you're not colored. You're African American. And this is what they name you. The slavers name you this. Because I know a white guy who grew up in South Africa. And he now lives in America. He is an African American, and more African American than most. Do you see how African American is a misnomer? It's a misnomer. Don't check that box. It's a title given to blacks by democratic slavers. Okay? Let's be real. They want you to check the box just like they want the Anglo-Saxon to check the Caucasian box. It's not true. So, again, we've got the four-tier system. Number one, we have the regal Negro nomadic class that are exiled from the kingdom of Judah. They are their own royal tribe in Africa. Then, number two, we have the native black African trackers. They're going to track them down. And number three, we have the Islamic trappers, because between 650 of the Common Era and 1900 of the Common Era, 10 to 20 million people were enslaved by the Arab slave traders. Over 20 million enslaved Africans were delivered through the Trans-Sahara route to the Islamic world. Can you get your head around that? That's not even touching the Americas. Over 80 million more blacks died at the hands of Islam en route. And number four, we have Ashkenazi Khazar Jewish ship merchants. And of course, the Portuguese and the British Ashkenazi were the main buyers. Islam and the Ashkenazi, those that say that they are Jews and are not, were the main sellers. Does that make sense? You've got to dig into this further. We have the two tiers right there. We have the Islamic trappers, and then we have the Ashkenazi ship merchants. You see, the Romans, they were globalist slavers. They were. During the period from Pompey to Julius, it has been estimated that over 1 million Jews fled into Africa, fleeing from Roman persecution and slavery. The slave markets were full of black Jewish slaves. Page 86. Many Jews fled to those parts of northwest Africa known as Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, and Mauritania. Many other Jews fled to areas where Rome didn't have any jurisdiction. This was the region to the south, the Sahara Desert and the Sudan. You see, in the 1930s, it was an established fact that the regal class of Negro nomads exiled from the kingdom of Judah, that they resided in Songhai, in Mali, in Ghana, in Kenem, in Bornu, in the empire, and within the Onadu forest of Dahomey south of Timbuktu. Communities complete with Aramaic Torah scrolls. On page 90, From Babylon to Timbuktu, it says this: the black Jews had an advantage over the African tribes. Now, this is going to tell you why the native indigenous black Africans worked with Islam to trap the house of Judah and sell them to the Ashkenazi ship owners that were also Portuguese and British Ashkenazi ship owners. And that's the history we want to see. Why did this happen? Page 90. The black Jews had an advantage over the African tribes. They carried their culture, they carried their history, laws, and written records with them. This assured them a constant precedent for the development of a higher social organization. Because of the stability of the black Jewish culture, the Jews were not absorbed into the autochthonous population. In fact, the Jews absorbed some of the native tribes. The Jews made use of every opportunity. They were an industrious and skillful people. In the Jewish Ghanaian states were found kings, princes, governors, generals, secretaries, treasurers, revenue agents, judges, architects, engineers, doctors, historians, language interpreters, mathematicians, jewelers, sculptors, masons, carpenters, painters of art, goldsmiths. There were leather workers, potters, armorers, saddlers, blacksmiths, agriculturists. Do you think the indigenous blacks resented the regal Negro nomadic class of the House of Judah? And do you think they wanted to get paid by Islam? And do you think Islam wanted to get paid by the Ashkenazi Jewish ship merchants? And then you get to your transatlantic slave movement. But don't start at the ships on the west coast of Africa. That's all you're going to get in your democratic American public re-education system. And it just troubles me. Even blacks in this country aren't educated enough to go further back. Do you know how many blacks in America have been lost to Islam? It's outrageous. That's not your tribe. Your tribe is Judah. Muhammad's tribe enslaved you. Why would you convert to Muhammad's tribe when you're of King David's tribe? Don't convert to the tribe that enslaved you and then sold you to Ashkenazi ship merchants. More black Negroes have been lost to Islam in the 20th century than any other Bible-believing group. It's outrageous. Because they don't want you to know who you really are and what tribe you're from. But you're not from Muhammad's tribe. Never were. Never were. You are a regal Negro class from the royal house of Judah. Amen. It's outrageous to me. Islam.
So yeah, there you have it. So-called African Americans were the children of Israel, where our origin is not Islam or Arabic. We're the Bani Yasharal, children of Israel. And there you have it, you know. So, and right there you have on the right-hand side the line of Judah for the house of Judah, and then you have on the left the symbolic for the house of Israel, the northern kingdom. So yeah, brothers and sisters, like, subscribe, share, comment down below, respectfully. We're going to bring more breakdowns and touch on more things. And with that, I bid you shalom.